So, as you can see, I'm currently doing the fog trial in Tower Defense Simulator as part of the new modifiers and trials update. Now, there are some things about the modifier and trials update that I need to talk about and are basically included in this update that I may have forgotten to mention because, well, the developers haven't really made it clear in the update log, or if they have, I can't read. So, when it comes to modifiers in Tower Defense Simulator, as you can see down here, these are all the modifiers. The modifier update, it basically adds a whole bunch of, well, new-ish modifiers to Tower Defense Simulator. Some of the modifiers that were used, they were kind of already in Tower Defense Simulator, so the one that springs to mind, for example, is the glass modifier. That glass modifier was in Tower Defense Simulator already and was already being used by admins in Tower Defense Simulator. Look at this, I'm going to be fine. What's 75 breaker? 32 abnormal, yeah, that's fine. So the trials themselves, this is a area of the lobby, which I'll show you later, where you get to play these maps and such. Now, from the looks of things, you can only actually activate them through the elevators. You can't use them you can't actually use matchmaking to actually get there, which is very interesting because, well, the matchmaking has been touted as a thing that the developers have been wanting to use for a while now, but now not so much. I don't know why. And I'm going to lose, which is fine. So I get to show you off. So if you die during a trial, you don't get any rewards. It's very similar to the challenge maps that these trials have replaced. So this is the area of the lobby, the modifier area, where you're able to play these maps. I do believe you have to probably be like level 50 to play these. And you're shown what the modifier is. So right now it's fog for the next hour. And then you can see here, the map is Winter Abyss. So every 3 hours, the modifier and the map is randomly generated. This means that it's extremely difficult to actually strategize or like actually have like a printed out strategy for the upcoming modifier and the upcoming map because it's all random. I think the developers, they're able to know what modifier and what map is upcoming, which means they can probably prepare for it, but obviously they're not going to tell the community about it. Now, this is obviously done on purpose so that many people in Tower Defense Simulator aren't able to use their old strategies to play Tower Defense Simulator, which has led to Tower Defense Simulator to become boring. Basically, because of these modifiers, because of basically set gameplay and set towers in Tower Defense Simulator, the community, they are often using like strategies to beat the game. So, for example, when it comes to Solo Police Wastelands 2, like, yeah, sure, it's quite hard, but if you have a strategy that tells you what to do, a written strategy in a document, it means that it has become trivial to almost beat Solo Police Wastelands 2. Sure, you need some skill, and probably a good PC, but when it comes to these modifier trials, because you're unable to actually see what your map is and what your modifier is going to be, it kind of does mean that you're unable to properly strategize for this. Like, there's not going to be a placement map where you can place down all of your towers here in specific spots to counter these enemies, for example, on this specific way, because 3 hours is just not enough time to do this. And yeah, sure, over time, some of the modifiers, they will be able to repeat because there are a finite amount of modifiers and a finite amount of maps. However, do you know how many maps there are in Tower Defense Simulator? By my last reckoning, about 50. And from the modifiers, there are about 13 modifiers, meaning that there are almost 1,000, I think there's over 1,000 combinations if all of the maps are being used, which I'm not sure if they are being used, but this does have, the challenge trials does have Mason Arch shown off here, which is an extremely hard map to beat. I made it on purpose, so purposely hard, but that does mean that it is basically impossible to strategize for every single combination of map and every single combination of modifier in Tower Defense Simulator for the trials, purely because it is extremely difficult. You are wasting your time by doing this, and I think it's actually kind of refreshing that there is no strategy for this. You just have to know your wits about how you play this map. And obviously you can play up to 4 players, so you probably want a team that all know what they're doing for specific maps. Oh, and additionally, Below Natural has enabled skills for this, meaning that, yeah, you probably actually want to, max out your skill tree for this. So, you know what, I'm going to do that. Thank you very much. With that being said, some of these skills are going to be quite useless when it comes to certain modifiers. So, for example, there is a modifier which disables the selling of towers, meaning that this resourcefulness skill is going to be useless. And also the Scholar skill, that's nearly useless in this game mode as well. There is the Champion Templar in these modifier maps. I think all the modifier maps they use all of the different wave structure. They all use the same wave structure, but with the modifier and the map applied to it, meaning that there is going to be a champion Templar at the end of these. Now, what you get from the modifiers is a reward, which I haven't gotten yet, embarrassingly, but you also are able to use that modifier that you've just unlocked. So, for example, if I beat the fog modifier trial, then I'm able to actually unlock the fog modifier to be used in normal gameplay. This means that I can go here, and then I can vote for the fog modifier to be used. And these fog modifiers, or these modifiers in general, they actually do increase your rewards depending on the amount of difficulty they actually do to you. The only problem is they're not shown correctly here, and you just have to refer to the update log. I believe for fog, it increases your rewards by 30%. So actually, if you were to get all of the modifiers and enable them all, which would be probably a bad idea, but certainly it actually could help you increase the amount of grinding that you're able to do in Tower Defense Simulator per game if you have all of the modifiers enabled. Now obviously you need to have played the modifier game in general, the trials, before you're able to use that, meaning that, yeah, you're going to have to go through the process of actually beating it, which, as I've mentioned previously, is going to be very difficult if you just rely on paper strategies and you can't think on your own. Now, I do wonder what happens if you were to join a server with someone who has a modifier and then you don't have the same modifier yourself. Also, I do like the fact that you can ready up instantly when you join an elevator, reducing the amount of wait time that you do have to do, the 20 seconds in there. You can probably redo each trial even if you have the trial already. So for example, even if I were to get the fog modifier from this, I'll probably be able to do the trial again if it was fog again, purely for the rewards. The only problem is I actually don't know what the rewards are for this, and I don't know if they're going to be significant enough. Like, for example, when it came to the challenge maps, the rewards they gave out were kind of okay. They sometimes gave out nukes, they sometimes were good enough to give out I think a high grade crate sometimes, but then some of them were giving out gems instead of coins. So I'd be very interested to know what type of things the modifiers or the trials give out. Yeah, using trials and modifiers in the same lingo is going to be quite difficult. It's going to get some used to, but trials, they are the ones in the elevators, whereas the modifier is the one that's being used in the trial, and you also unlock it after the trial. And as I've said, there are 13 modifiers, which means there are 13 types of trials, but each trial has its own unique map that you can't change. It is random, meaning that if you are missing a specific modifier, and that modifier comes up to be for the Mason Arch map, one of the hardest maps in Tower Defense Simulator, good luck. I do want to know if the developers have like a plan to add like a leaderboard or a scoreboard of each unique combination of modifier and map that people have beaten, because some of these modifiers and some of these map combinations, they're going to be very difficult. Although that being said, I don't know if every single map is enabled for every single trial. It would be very cool if that were the case, because it would encourage other players to play different maps in Tower Defense Simulator, and that is one of the burdens of playing Tower Defense Simulator with random players. You are being forced to play maps that everyone wants to choose, and normally that's Crossroads. But if every single map in Tower Defense Simulator was enabled for trials, it would mean that there would be some variety in gameplay. Oh, and also a top tip when it comes to the fog trial, I don't think are units affected by the fog? I don't think the units are actually being affected by the fog, which I think is pretty cool. So yeah, that's the strategy you can use for the fog trial. Don't use units, use the military base, use the crook boss. Now obviously, when I say that you can't strategize for this, you can have like general strategies for it. So for example, when it comes to the fog trial, as I've mentioned previously, use units. They are not really that affected. Are they affected? I don't think they are, but I could be corrected. Yeah, I don't think they are. That it seems like a 20 blast radius, no, a 20 stud radius for me for their attack. But when it comes to trials, stuff like that, you have like general strategies that you can use, like we have on the wiki, like general tips, but you can't use a strategy for it because it's going to be impossible to have every single combination of map and every single combination of trial to do this. Which is why some people have found it very difficult, because they rely on it. And personally, I kind of like it. I kind of like the fact that you have to be on your wits about these things and you can't rely on paper strategies to actually play the game. I think it's very unique, and because you're playing different maps in Tower Defense Simulator, it does kill a lot of birds with one stone. In my guessing, I think it's 3. You get extra rewards in Tower Defense Simulator, you play unique maps in Tower Defense Simulator, and you can't strategize for this on paper in Tower Defense Simulator. That's, at the very least, solving 3 issues, key issues in Tower Defense Simulator. I think that's very cool. Now, obviously, there's going to be some advantage to this for people who have, like, unlocked all of the skills and then unlocked all of the towers, including event towers. But I think that's kind of fair, given the fact that you have paid for this, and it would be kind of useless without skills otherwise. But then there's also the case of consumables. You can't use consumables in these trials, which I think is kind of fair. Otherwise, many people would probably like use the Molten Monster or use a nuke and just like nuke everything, which I think the developers don't want, and I think it's fair. But yeah, that's my opinion of Trials. I think it is very cool, and I think the developers have done a pretty good job when it comes to this. Yeah, so I think the Golden Crook boss, remember when it was voted to be like one of the best towers in Tower Defense Simulator? I think with the advent of Trials, it might be one of the best, I can't lie. It's pretty good. Also, the Game Master Crook boss that creates a glass piggy bank above you, it does bring some light to the map, which I find kind of cool, and I think makes the Game Master Crook boss, Golden Crook boss, the best skin and tower to use in these trials. Damn, the modifiers are actually very, very difficult, it turns out. Yeah, I imagine the developers might want to change some things about it, because this is... Ooh, this is very, very difficult, especially in solo, although I anticipate that the developers probably didn't mean for anyone to actually try and solo this.